Hi there, I'm Karen Dunn of KMD Productions. From the equipment manufacturers to the engineers to the business people behind the scenes. Over the years, every member of the Pro Audio Corner of the music industry have become family to me, and it's my job to bring the whole eclectic crew together. Each episode, I'll introduce you to one of these characters and open a window into my world of creating community in pro audio. Thanks for tuning in to One and Dunn. Hi, my guest today is Jimmy Douglas. He's a mixer, engineer, producer. Jimmy, thanks for coming. I'm happy to see you.
My pleasure.
I've actually seen you three times this year, right? Two virtual events and at the Audio Masters Golf Tournament.
Yeah, which was awesome, by the way. Awesome.
Yeah, I was out in the middle of the course and they said you have a guest that wants to see you. It's like, who could that be? Who in Nashville knows me? That's not on the course. So it was great to see you. My first question for you is, how did you get the name The Senator? I have no idea where that came from.
Well, The Senator came from, I've been in this industry quite some time, and so there's I call it two different careers. There's the R&B, rock and roll, jazz, all that career, working at Atlantic Records, and the music changed, and I did all these things, and I had a really nice career, as I call it, made some great records, and then music kind of changed a little bit, and that's when I ended up with the Timberland hip hop world. And as we were about to launch, there was Timberland and another kid who was going to be the manager guy, and he was like, "You can't be Jimmy Douglas." And I'm like, "Why not?" He goes, "Because that ain't how we doing it. You guys have a name." And I was like, "Okay." So basically, I remembered. Always stuck with me. The guy who's doing Lauryn Hill's records was Commissioner Gordon. That's what he called himself, and it just always stuck with me. Like, what? Are you kidding me? And so they were saying, "Well, what could you be, man? You want to be president?" I said, "I don't want to be a president." And I was like, "You know what? A senator." And let me tell you why. Because basically, without being harsh on the industry is very political. It's totally political. Every move you make, there's something politics. And I went, okay, I want to be the senator because I'm the guy that has to, kind of be the middleman to get all this stuff sorted out. And there it is, self-appointed name.
Okay. I've always wondered that, and I didn't know the story. So I know you're from Philly originally, right? So you were there till you were 11, I think, and you grew up listening to church gospel music. Then you moved to an affluent area in New York where your music experiences were completely different. Do you think that played a part at all in how you record or mix music now, having those two very different backgrounds?
Two very different worlds, and I think that, the gospel stuff was that, but it was also the street. I mean, in the street.
Sure.
At home in Philly, I'm listening to James Brown. I'm listening to all the real soul. Which I don't think they were calling it then that. They were calling it race records or whatever they were calling it. But I was listening to, the down home stuff, the blues, and so I was hearing all of that on a daily basis. You'd hear some of the pop records as well. I think I would hear some of no, Motown wasn't white, it was still black. But it sounded, but compared to the really heavy duty funky stuff, the Patti LaBelle's and all that stuff, it was a little more pop. But I wasn't hearing the white acts that I heard when I moved into New York City, living amongst basically a white contingent. I grew up in a white neighborhood, and so going to school and in the same experiences we all had, the same radio station, I'm listening to the British invasion basically, which is totally different. Well, is it? Because they kind of stole the blues and brought it over and turned it into rock and roll. So is it different? But yeah, it was presented differently. I'll put it that way.
So I know you wanted to be an architect in high school, so that didn't pan out. But did you take any of the skills that you learned when you were taking classes for architecture? Were you able to incorporate them at all in your recording?
I really believe that's part of how I perceive recording. I mean, it's all a process, and you've got to go through it, and everything is pretty. So this is an interesting statement. Everything is pretty organized and very
Mm-hmm.
focused, and yet when it comes to recording, it's really not. But it has to start someplace,
Uh-huh.
and that's what I do with my assistants. When I get assistants and stuff, they want to get to the music. I'm like, no, no, go build this little box for me and do whatever. And I watch them do it, and it's like, if you can't do basic skills of just putting stuff together, you're not going to be able to do this other stuff. Now, to be fair, I used to have a board, and part of the board is that whole logic of everything is in order and organized,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Well, without the board now, and with the thousand tutorials online and a million little things, and $200 to get you a DAW, an audio
Uh-huh.
DAW. So it's not exactly the same as it was, but that's where my thinking comes from.
Uh-huh.
Organization.
Is that unique in the industry, your approach that way?
I don't think it's unique. I think we all need. I think, like I said, I think we all need to have skills of some sort, or have some sort of um, logic running in your head of some sort of flow, some sort of logical flow. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
And the parts can change depending on what you're doing, but the logic has to be there. If you're not getting the logic, you're not going to make a very good record. You know.
Yeah.
I once had an assistant that I tried to train him really badly, really hard, but it's like I have these fuses on my tweeter and my woofer, and then I think the tweeter popped, and I said, go change the
Uh-huh.
fuse, and he didn't know which speaker to go to, and I went, oh, this is not going to work out very good.
Well, I've heard when I've been talking to different people for the podcast, a lot of the engineers, the mixers, producers, they say everybody can come out with the same skill level, and that's really not what it is. It's more your ability to hang with people, get along with people, because you're with them a lot, right? So you have to be able to get along with other people. And you can teach skills, right? You can teach the technique, but you can't teach that hang value.
Well, that's totally correct, and that hasn't really changed from when I'm
Uh-huh.
this high to I'm now this high, but um, but on the other hand, one of the biggest things is like the people skills is very, very important. I've gotten thrown off many a gigs for the people skills. Didn't I either didn't desire to have them that day, or I just didn't have
Uh-huh.
it that day, or it just didn't melt, and so you go your way, But
Right.
in terms of the skills about what we do, so it's like anything. Even as if you're a writer, there's a million devices that you may have to write a novel, but you got to know when to use the devices. You can't just use them.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to go, okay, now we need a conflict over here. So now I'm going to think about, and you pull those in. You don't put those in the first chapter. I'm just saying, there, even though the knowledge is there, you still got to know when it's time to use it. It's,
Right.
or like golfing.
Right. You need those 10,000 hours, right?
Well, yeah, that's something.
But you need the repetition, you need the
You need
experience.
the experience. Yeah, you need to feel. You need to feel. That's what I believe. That's the
Yeah.
difference. And feeling doesn't necessarily quantify. It doesn't come in quantified words. Feeling, but you got to know
Uh-huh.
you got to know the tools that are in the shed before you start.
Right.
That's it.
Right. Right. Okay. So your career is really interesting in that you wanted to be an architect. You kind of fell into the whole Atlantic Studios um, by happenstance, right? Because of a neighbor. And and it seems like you have like the dream career, but it's not what you were going after to start with. So can you talk a little bit about how you started Atlantic and just your career path?
Um, well, yeah. uh, it's just I was a musician that was playing like all the other kids around, and that's what we did back then. Everybody wanted to be the next, and I imagine it's no
Right.
different than now. Everybody's got a little computer, a little DAW, a little 808, and everybody wants to be the next. Now they can rap, they can be the next. But ours was guitar and drums and jetta and keyboards. So
Right.
anyway, so that was that, and I thought I was pretty good. Actually, I was pretty much one of the better ones around of the community I was in. That
Uh-huh.
was a classic case where they were all very well endowed, so their parents would buy them all the great stuff, all the great gear.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't afford the great gear, but I could play. They had the gear, they couldn't play. um, so it was going to be time to I guess go, I guess, time to go to school. I mean, go move on to a higher learning education. I
Uh-huh.
graduated when I was 16. I wasn't necessarily that smart. I have one of those birthdays that puts you in the next class. And
Uh-huh.
also, when I came from Philadelphia, they had skipped me a year, a combination of things. So I graduated young. And
Uh-huh.
it seems like, um, don't ask me why. I don't know anything more than anybody else. But um, so the thing was, the people I met, it was actually through a girl, actually. Then ended up being a really dear friend, even a girlfriend for a while. But like her family happened to be involved in Atlantic Records. But the thing that was so interesting about that relationship, it wasn't really for in the beginning for her as a girl. It was because I would play stuff at her house and stuff, and she would like critique it and tell me how to do it better, and all this other. And I was
Uh-huh.
just like, "What are you doing? Like, how do you know this?" And then as I got to know her, she's brilliant. Anita Wexler was her name. She's brilliant, brilliant person, brilliant her
Uh-huh.
mind. So that was the beginning of that, and then when it came time, it was more like the family was like, and I knew nothing about her in the record business. I knew nothing about any of it. Didn't know her dad was in it. Da da
Mm-hmm.
da. But her mother took a liking to me and was like, when you go to college, and I'm thinking, really, who's going to college? Like, who's going to do that? And
Yeah.
she's like, yeah, well, it'd be great to have a job, well, to help you pay for this. So they offered me a job doing that. But it wasn't in the studio originally. It was actually, the dad, Jerry Wexler, he didn't really trust me to just throw you in. And
Uh-huh.
and so they put me in a thing where, like, back in the day with distribution, record distribution, they would have to have a place to distribute the records from the vinyl. And that
Uh-huh.
stuff was heavy. And then there was, all the record stores you had to sell it to. So they put me in a job with their distributor on Long Island City. And so
Uh-huh.
and there I learned a lot. I learned a lot there, which I wasn't expecting to learn, but it came, and I was willing. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing was, what I learned was there's record companies like Tower Records, Sam Goody, I forgot the names of all the companies, but all these mom and pop joints. And what would happen is you'd walk around with a cart, and you'd have an invoice, and you'd have the names of the records that Atlantic had available, and then they would have orders. And like I'll pick a group, for instance, that was Buffalo Springfield, for instance. I'd never heard of them,
Mm-hmm.
and there it was. But every day I'd go and I'd fill the cart, and every store I'd be putting 50 or 100 of those suckers in there, and I'm going, this has got to be really cool. So what I'm saying is, like, years later we have SoundScan, and before SoundScan, all the record company people would go, oh, the record's really hot. It's selling all these, right? Selling all these records, and then there was nobody who could really tell. And
Right.
I'm in the warehouse. I can tell what's really selling, because this one record, or like I get two or three of this one other record. I'm like, what is that? Nobody ever buys this one. What is this? Every day I'm putting 100, 200 of these. This record is hot. So, I guess I learned the true thing, what's behind the record companies, and that's also why I was getting my pickings from my friends. Because
Uh-huh.
I'd go back home with all the hot stuff that nobody knew about, because it
Sure.
was just there. I was like, I don't know what this is, but everybody's buying it, so let's just check it out. um,
That's a cool way to do
yeah,
it.
it was great, and so that was that part of the thing. And then I think I somewhere along the line I'm a young kid in the summer, and it's like I don't want to I got to show up late. What can I say? And they really got pissed about it, and I was like, well, then I don't want to do this anymore. And I didn't. And somehow I ended up over at the recording studio with this very interesting job. You had the dynamic was Jerry Wexler, Ahmet Erdogan, and his brother Nestle Erdogan, and then there's Tom Dowd in the studio part. And Atlantic Records was all one building, the whole
Uh-huh.
record company, and then two studios and two master rooms in the back. And there's the whole enchilada. There ain't no mo.
Mm-hmm.
And well, actually, on the third floor they had. So that was on the whole second floor, 1841 Broadway. And then in the back where the studio started, that was 11 West 60th Street, which was around the corner. And on the third floor, they had this. I call them the suits, the accountants and stuff. So it was all right there. And the thing is, I knew nothing about any of it, so I didn't have any reference to say good, bad, or whatever. I was like, this is just crazy. A lot's going on here. And I would come after school and go in at night is what I would do. And so the job they gave me was, and Tom Dow was in charge of this. They gave me this job of tape duplicating. And so I would duplicate, their whole catalog. When they would master it and stuff, I would have to make like 7 copies to send to foreign countries so they could master it. And so that was just a job. And all I was doing was going through their catalog nightly and hearing all this music that I would never. There's no way you would ever get to hear that. It's just like, because some of the records are hits and some of them are not. Actually, I should reverse that. Most of them are not. And then there's a handful that are hits. Right. I mean, that's really the truth. People don't really understand that. My stuff is really good. My stuff is as good as that. Yeah, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Unfortunately, 90% of this stuff will never see the light of day. I'm not trying to put a bad thing on it, but that's all I've ever seen in general, But
I always talk about how not everybody's going to be Steph Curry. There's a million basketball players out there, but not everybody can be Steph.
There you go. And there's a million really kids that are really good on the block that'll never, unfortunately, without all the parts and pieces, they're never going to have that day in the sun. One of the records I did find, though, that was so crazy. I remember when I put it on, I was doing like the tape guys. It was the first record by a guy named, it said Dr. John, the Night Tripper. And so there I was like, what can this possibly be? That sounds really weird. And I put that on to do the tape copy, and I just sat there, and he went on, they call me Dr. John. And I was like, what the fuck? I was just like, this is what I get to do for work?
That's so cool. Wow.
And years later, I got to do that record. I got to produce a record with Dr. John, and also I did Right Place, Wrong Time with him, which is one of his biggest records.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I got those.
Yeah. So you went into this not really knowing who any of these people were, like Tom Dowd or Reef or any of them. No. So looking back, it seems like a lot of your career, you've just done things and you haven't been afraid. You've made changes and just gone forward. And so many people are afraid of change, and they're afraid of trying to do things they don't know how to do. But you seem just to keep going forward and just doing it.
I think that whole attitude is what really drives me. It's like once I do know it's there, I just need to know how to do it, which is actually how I learned how to be on the board. Actually, it was watching Tom Dowd at nights. He was mixing. He'd be mixing. The whole concept was weird, by the way. There was all these groups that no longer exist, but to me, when I was a little kid, they were gods to me, like the Young Rascals, and I'm like, oh my God, the Young Rascals, oh my God, and then they're there, and I'm watching a session with them, and I'm watching a session, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, one night I'm supposed to be doing this tape copies, you remember, down the hall, and I keep running down the hall to look to see what they're doing, because the tape is playing for 20 minutes, so it doesn't need me. I'm supposed to be doing homework. Homework can wait. So I'm down the hall watching all this stuff go down, and there's a Reef Mardine with Tommy and the Young Rascals, and they're all doing stuff, and I noticed one thing that was really interesting, besides the board. I noticed that everybody kept talking to the guy in the seat at the board. This was just an observation from afar, and I was like, what's going on here? So that would be Tom or a Reef that was sitting right in the middle. And the group would muddle around, and they'd go do a take, they'd talk to everybody, come back, and they talk to the guy in the middle. And I went, wow, that guy is really important, because everybody's communicating with him. Like, he seems to be the guy that is the guy. And I was like, wow, I guess if I would try to get in this, I'd like to be that guy. So, like I said, Reef was a producer, so was Tom a producer. Atlantic raised producing engineers. We weren't just engineers, we were producers, because it was like, who else would know anything if you bring a band in? There's nobody else here, you're it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But I was soon to learn that what I observed, I was later I went, wrong position. That's the guy who has to work all the time. Everybody else gets breaks. You're the guy always working. That's kind of how that, I guess, ended up tooling up. But watching Tom Dowd, he was mixing the one record, and the thing about this, which is interesting, Tom never really said, "Now here, kid, this is how this works." He didn't work that way. He would just do what he did, and you had to figure out what he was doing and catch on. And it wasn't like he was playing a game. He's working. It's like I said to you earlier.
Right.
There's a structure and there's a method to it. It's not that deep.
Right.
And if you have a basic mind that really is kind of organized like that, you will catch on. You can't not catch on. I mean, well, unless you're not going to catch on.
Right,
but in his
right.
world, he's like,
And then you go do
yeah,
something
exactly.
else.
In his world, he's like, oh, this is what goes on. You can watch. He never said I never said anything to him. I would never ask him anything. I'd watch everything he would do, and then I would come in before school, and I would go try to do everything I saw him do. And they told me, the Atlantic, they said, we got these. They had these 8-track tapes in the library. They went, we have these demos. You can play with them if you want to figure out how that works, but don't touch anything else. So I'd put tapes up and try to figure out how to make things work. And the thing is, I would keep doing it until I couldn't do it, and then I would ask Tom a question, maybe days later, like one question that was really key for me stopping me, and he would just go. It was the desired result. He'd look at me like, how do you know how to ask that question? And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be the kid that came in here and every 2 seconds, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because that's not on his level. I mean, after all, the guy delivered the atom bomb, so that's not really on his level, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But the nicest guy, I love Tom Dowd. My story with him is he was, I think he got the Les Paul Award, or that was inducted into Hall of Fame at the Tech Awards. And so we developed a phone relationship over a few years. And he found out that I was afraid of flying. And there was one year that I was flying to AES for, in New York. And he called me, and he was in Miami. And he said, I just wanted to let you know your flight tomorrow is going to be fine. I checked out the weather, and it's all going to be smooth sailing. And that just touched my heart, that someone, that he would care enough to call me, that he would check and then call me and let me know. Yeah.
So yeah, that relationship I kind of went till eventually he was mixing this is how it goes. He was mixing coming towards the end, and I saw him using patch cords and everything, and I figured a lot of it out, and when he was about to do something, I ran up and I offered him the patch cord because I was watching what he was doing, and he was just like, whoa, this kid is on something. And then so he suggested to them that they start giving me a little more responsibility. It was off of his recommendation that they started opening yeah.
That's very cool. So have you always been driven like that to learn and be better?
Unfortunately, yes. And I say unfortunately because there's another way to do this, which is by the book. You sit down and you read the stuff. I've always been one who just kind of I fidget until, have I always been that way? Yeah, when I was a little kid, I had a little model train my mom bought me, right? Not a model train, electric train. And then something broke on it. So you know what I did? I took it apart to fix it.
And did you fix it?
No. No. It was in pieces, but the point was I was driven to try to do that, and that's just me. I need to see how it works.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. So you went from Atlanta. How long were you there?
Atlantic Records?
Yeah.
I was there probably about 15 years maybe.
And then did you go directly to start working with Timbaland?
No, not at all. I was wandering. I left Atlantic Records. I left. They went through this. So in this process, Atlantic Studio Record Company, blah blah blah, in the early 70s, they split and moved the operation to Rockefeller Plaza. They were part of Warner Brothers, Warner Communications. They did the merger, all this stuff. And they said to me, you know, you can come with us to the offices, and you can be an A&R, and you can do all that stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I enjoy being in the studio and playing around and having fun. And so I really don't want to be a part of that. So I lost, when they did that separation, I lost that trail, you know, to being a record exec, basically. That's the path to being a record exec. And
Right.
I'd be doing that. I hope that little hop around the town from this company and that. But so no, I stayed in the record company, and then I became, knock on wood, not knock on wood, it already happened. I don't have to knock on wood. What am I talking about? And then I was, you know, I started making some really great records, rock and roll records. You know, the Foreigner stuff was great. Genesis, Peter Gabriel. Just that whole era came, and I was the hot hand.
Were they seeking you out then at that point?
So here's the thing, because I worked for Atlantic Records still. I wasn't an independent contractor. I was working for Atlantic Records, and their studio, because they owned it, they didn't try to push it. They weren't really billing people right. It was a very interesting dynamic. You know, like what they would do. Like, for instance, I worked with the Stones for 2 years on the Love You Live album, and also on the Some Girls album. I did some of the stuff on that and mixed a couple of those and recorded with them. But the reason it started was because Ahmed had signed the Rolling Stones, and part of his deal was, he was like, they had they must have had 80, 100 tapes or whatever from all their touring.
Wow.
And they, well, because they were touring in Europe, you know, they were the Stones.
Sure, yeah.
And they were recording every one of those things.
Yeah.
And they were trying to put a record together. And he's like, well, just use the studio. I won't charge you. So they were like, that's a good deal. Well, it's his studio. I mean, he doesn't have to charge him. But meanwhile, you know, he's pocketing something else instead. I don't know. I didn't say that. But it all makes sense. So that's how the studio was kind of run. It had its own, mission. Anyway, so like I spent 2 years with the Rolling Stones for that reason, because I was just there. And then, you know, we did some of the records they were doing and blah, 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 blah. But so, and then because of that, you know, the English invasion, you know, the second wave that came in the early 80s there, I was part of that. Well, the late 70s, early 80s, yeah. So I was a part of that, and I was making some nice hits, and I was producing records, and also that was a period of time I was doing all the funk stuff with like Slave and all the R&B acts, and I had the hot hand, you know. And I was in the middle of it all, and I was just there. I was, and it was happening, and life was good. And as time as the 80s rolled into the end of the 80s, a new music appeared on the scene, and Atlantic wasn't really in it yet, and it was the rap scene. So we weren't doing much of that over there. So like life kind of turned around. You know, Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons were downtown doing it in other studios, and I didn't know. You know what I mean? So life kind of flipped around. So I spent a bunch of years actually. I bought a tape machine. I had a 24-track tape machine in my home. I had a little console in my home. So I would be the early, you call it the bedroom, whatever, but it was a real console. I had I sectioned out a whole piece of my living room for it, and my kids were like, they were cool with it. People would come over, I'd record. It just was, the world was changing too fast, and there was this Synclavier, the digital revolution, everything was just changing quickly. So I started doing posting and jingles to keep my family going, basically. Because when I left Atlantic, I got numerated pretty good. I was there for a lot of years, so it worked out. That worked out well, but as you know, it doesn't last forever.
Right.
And so I had to move over to a different type of thing. Now, what happened in this posting world and this jingle world, unlike the records, you could be very free form, and we would take our time, and we'd make sure things were right, and we would enjoy everything, and we'd feel everything. The music. Solo's not good. Let's do it again. Let's do the solo for 6 hours until we get it, till it really feels that way. Let's face it. It's a record. It's going to be recorded forever. It's going to be heard forever. Let's get it right. When I moved to the other world over there, they were like, you have this much time to do this. Okay, boom, 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 it's done. I'm like, but there's all these imperfections. Nobody's paying attention. Shh, quiet.
Wow.
Just quiet, Jimmy. Because I kept thinking, wow, I'm going to learn some new stuff. And it was like, every day I'd be like, I'm waiting to learn. And it's like, we're done. And I'm like, oh, I see what's going on. Tomorrow we had to do it all again because you guys said the sponsor's name wrong. Okay, so we did like maybe 8 hours worth of work on tape and all this stuff and bouncing and all this stuff, and they were like, we got to do that part again. Why? Because he said their name wrong. And I'm like, are you shitting me? And it's like, no, that's what we do here. It's like, but all that other stuff, those crackles and all that bad stuff I heard yesterday that nobody's caring about, and it's like, oh, I see. So it's not about that. It's only about the product.
Right.
And so we are a byproduct to sell the product. So, boom. And you know, with the posting, it was like though I was with a guy named Peter Fish. He's passed now. Fantastic. And he would do like the CBS, like like okay, so like let's just say a bad example, but I'm gonna have to use it.
Okay.
The kid shoots those people in Illinois, right? Okay, so basically Peter's job was to they call him, they go, boom, emergency. You got to tell them, kid shoots da 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 on the news tonight at 11. That was it. So we're doing, and he's putting music behind that, and we're putting boom, and I'm going. So we were always working, doing stuff for the moment, but that piece that we did is never going to be heard again. So nobody really cares about the details. So this is going somewhere, by the way. So, when my life moved on, and I'm trying to actually get out of the whole. I did this work in this Japanese factory with a whole bunch of other people. It was before karaoke existed, and it's called karaoke. It's not called karaoke, as Americans put it, because they kept saying, we were like, why are we spending all this time? And they pay us no money, by the way. They're like $15 an hour, and we were just re-recording real records. John Stork, you may know John. Of course, you know John Stork.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So John Stork, who helped, I know John because when we redid Atlantic Studio B, I got to know John real well. And John shows up at that factory because they were going to probably change. They had the old original hit factory in New York City. They had 4 rooms running. We were just redoing records, all the parts with real musicians. And if there were strings, we would put strings. It wasn't synthesizers. And they were spending the money. And we're like, why are you doing this? And they go, karaoke, karaoke. And I'm like, what is that? And then we would do that. So anyway, John walks in one day, and I see him, and I go, John, da-da. He goes, and he always tells me this story because I don't really remember it. He goes, I remember walking in, and you said, John, I'm making records I actually made before again. And he thought that was funny. I thought it was, I didn't know what it was. But the point is, there was a lot of speed involved in that, and a lot of texture training, trying to get the same sound, because we tried to make them sound as close, like it was a Motown record. We tried to make it sound like the Motown record. And you'd hire a guitar player for 3 hours or 4 hours just to do every little guitar part. And we would, so that's what I learned there. And with that, with the jingle, with the speed, when I fell back into the situation and I met Timbaland and Jodeci and Missy Elliott and Genuine and all that stuff, was all in this big, it was like a big tank in Rochester. And the thing was, they had so much talent up there and nobody was anybody yet, but they needed speed. Like we did about 300 records in 2 years. I mean, soup to nuts. And the thing was, it was all about speed. And the speed I gained, I learned that knowledge with the jingle stuff. Learning how to just be, you know what, it's okay, we can keep it moving. And that's kind of that whole thing.
So you have worked, as you were just mentioned, some of them, a huge variety of genres. Do you have favorite people that you've worked with or favorite songs that you worked on?
I mean, it's funny because when I say it and then I go back and listen, I go, it's not that great. But some of the favorites are, one of the ones I really love that I did, it was one of the first ones that I did that was, I call Bigger Than Me. The record was just so huge and massive that I couldn't believe I was actually on it. I'd never done anything I was never a part of anything that was that grand to me. It was the Hole in Oates She's Gone record. which was really very special. I love that record. Another record is Justin Timberlake's Cry Me a River. I like that record a lot. Once again, it's just had textures and stuff that I could,
Sure.
And there's a lot of the slave records I did that I really actually like a lot as well. The funk stuff.
So was it hard to change from people like, Hall & Oates and Foreigner and Led Zeppelin to Missy Elliott and Genuine and Jay-Z? Was it a hard transition, or were you just ready and up for the challenge?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, like you just said, like the way.
Well, I know it didn't, but,
No, but
it's so different, right?
Well,
to go from one to the other.
So there was a training period in my life between the 80s and into the 90s to watch how new music was being made. I had that desire to be a part of what was going on.
Right.
And and when the opportunities came, I was able to fill the spot. But like I said, it didn't happen overnight, so I was used to hearing the new music. I was used to hearing the new funk, if you will. And, when a guy like Timberlake comes along and he's just doing stuff that's just totally different. And to be fair, I was doing the Jodeci album when I met him. That's how I got in the door, and he was a part of that crew. And so, Jodeci is crazy. That's just basically old R&B. There's nothing new about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it was. So here's the other thing. As a kid in Atlantic Studios, one day I'm doing modern jazz quartet. One day I'm doing Aretha Franklin. One day I'm doing Roberta Flack. One day I'm doing New York Rock and Roll Ensemble. One day I'm doing, you know what I'm saying? So, down to even like a Zeppelin record once. I'm saying, so I was always doing all these different things, and they all were the same. They're not not interpret this. I'll say it I might be saying it the wrong way, but when you're doing the actual project or you're doing the actual work, even though they're all different genres, you still approach them the same way. Now, you may do stuff differently once you're in there, but it's still, it's music, and it's got to be recorded. And that's really, keep it real simple, that's the basic bottom line. That was my...
Right, and you have your framework, right? So you always have the same framework, you just adjust it based on who you're working with?
I didn't have the same...
I mean, you start at one end?
Okay, so it's okay. So let's go backwards a little bit. So...
Okay.
Let's go back to a time when you had to put microphones up and you didn't sample shit, you just actually, people played. How about that? Okay, so I'm saying they would set the tone by what they were playing. I just had to put the mics in the right places and then go, well, let's see, this doesn't sound right for this type of music, so I'll remove the mics. But you're right, I had a basic place I would start, but I was willing to and be open enough to let it go where it had to go instead of being like, because there were people that would like this. You guys aren't playing right because it doesn't sound right. Huh? That's like your job, bro. Like your job is to help them sound right. But there were people that would be like, I do it this way, and you guys aren't fit. It's not fitting in my format, so it must be what you guys are doing. No, it's a true story.
Wow. Well, so isn't it basically your job as an engineer or mixer or whatever to realize the artist's vision in the best sounding way possible?
One would think, yes. But yeah, no, to me, with no artists, you don't have anything. You got a bunch of equipment.
Right.
So really, you want to bring out the best that they can be and have it shine, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what's the major difference between working with an established artist and working with a brand new group?
That's an interesting question.
It only took us 38 minutes for you to say it was an interesting question.
You're funny. No, what I mean is like, okay, so could be a two-sided question. So here it is. Probably the biggest difference between working with an established artist and a nobody, theoretically, is that you kind of have to listen to the established artists, and you have to approach them differently because they've done it, and they expect a little bit of respect that way. Like I say, blah 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 and blah blah blah, and even if you think not, you're like, okay, let's see how we go about this, and you have to kind of go about them with kid gloves. Not saying they're wrong or right. It's just that they deserve that respect, and they can go anywhere they want
Right.
to go, and they can use anybody they want to use. Okay, so you to be in
Right.
this
Right.
part. That's the part you said earlier about the people thing. That's when that
Mm-hmm.
comes in really heavily. Um, and then if I'm working with somebody who doesn't really know, it's like I respect them as musicians and whatever, but if I can get there faster than you can, because I've done this a bunch of times and I have a couple little tricks up my sleeve that might help us that you don't
Uh-huh.
know about, I'm going to push you to do those things. I might not listen as much to you because, well, quite honestly, it's not sounding that great right now. If it was sounding that great, okay,
Uh-huh.
I've been with bands, by the way. There's a group called Black Heat that I once did with me and a producer, Joel Dorn, and he begged me to stay after hours to do this band. He was doing a favor for somebody, blah 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, we'll sit and we'll have fun. We'll just have a laugh. And these guys came in, and let me just tell you what kind of laugh we had. Mouths hanging open, just like they were that good. And they ended up being one of my
Wow.
first groups that I was actually producing and making money with. But I remember they were in there, and we just looked at each other like, what the fuck? So there was nothing to do. I mean, there was things to
Uh-huh.
do, but like I described before, their trick was they were tight as fuck, and they sounded great. That
Uh-huh.
was their trick, and now it's time for me to
Uh-huh.
listen. Now, what can I do with this to make it more?
Right.
Um, then there's the case when and so what's the difference? So I'll give you another interesting, very interesting. I think it's interesting story. There was a time I was doing a record with a group called the Spinners, and this is when disco was kind of going away. But I wasn't making disco records, even though Atlantic had that ability. They had the Bee Gees and all that stuff. I wasn't making the disco
Uh-huh.
records. I was making rock and roll records. Um, and I
Uh-huh.
was ACDC. I'm making that's the sound that I'm getting on drums. I'm not getting that dumb. I wasn't getting that sound. So they hired me to do the Spinners, and the producers were all they had like their panties in a wad or something, and they didn't really trust that I and all the studio musicians were there, and the drum sound I was getting was really like open, and they're like, oh, what's going on? This is not good. And so they kept calling the A&R guys, going, are you sure this guy can do it? And I heard them doing, and after a while I got really offended, and I decided this was one of those days I decided I don't care, I'll get fired today because I'm not going to take this. I know what I can do, and the
Uh-huh.
way you guys are talking to me is very disrespectful. And so eventually I was like, look, let's just try to do this. Da da. He goes, yeah, let's see if you can get a kick sound like that if you can. And I was like, oh. And I went, you're right,
Oh.
I can't. And I just walked out. And I went, okay, so let's see. They got about 8 musicians in there, so that's going to cost the studio that money. And I'm thinking, you just fucked up, Jimmy. You really just fucked up. But I just didn't. I didn't. I was to that point where I was like, I don't care. And the other side of that story was there's a group called Slave that I was doing like their fourth album. They'd been away from me for a while, and we came back, and I had like the record, not the record of the year, but like I had that record that we made after being rejected from that. And so how did they treat me? They treated me like help us, and I was able to be me.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
like I said, it's an interesting question. It has so many parts to it.
Right. So when you start with a new artist, someone you haven't worked with before, how do you establish the relationship and the trust that you need to be able to work with them and do what you need to do?
I start by hopefully having the time to have a meeting, have a meeting with them and talk to them about who they think, I always say, who do you think you are? No, who do you think you are? No. Yeah, I start by doing that to understand where they want to go, where their vision is, and how they think they're going to get there based off of what they have or don't have. And, and if everything coincides together and it works, it's like, well, let's just do this. If everything doesn't, then already I can see we're going to have some compromises here to try to get some place that
Right.
we can make something that resembles something of quality.
Right. And I can't imagine that you're a good fit with every artist that comes to you, or that there's got to be personalities. There's got to be factors that you don't really want to work with someone just because you're not the right person. They need to go see someone else, and that would probably be a better fit. Does that happen?
That has happened to me, and actually, one of the people that he's my best friend to this day. Actually, Kevin Rudolph. When before he did Kevin Rudolph, he came to me. Well, he didn't come to me. His mother tricked me actually, and he had a deal on another label. He was called, I forgot the name of it, but he sold a few records, and but she tricked me. She goes, "There's this kid. I want you to listen to it. Tell me what you think." And I heard it, and I was like, "This is really fire." And she goes, "Yeah, it's my son." I was like, "Oh, great." And by the way, that's really the best way to do that kind of stuff, if you ask me. Because if she said it's my son right away before I even heard it, I would have been my ears would have been in a place. And anyway,
Sure, yeah.
I loved it. And then we got together, loved each other, and then he started bringing all the stuff to my studio in New York City, and setting up for the album. And then as we're going through it, I'm beginning to help him do what I do, which is like, we should probably do this and do this. And he wouldn't do any of it. He just wouldn't do any of it. He was doing it his way. And after a while, a bunch of days, I was like, I believe that nobody can make this record that you want to make but you, by yourself. So I suggest that, and the thing is, I was kind of doing a lot of work, so it wasn't like I needed the work, because that's important.
Right.
I was being very candid. I'm like, I'm spending a lot of time with you, but you're not really taking any of my ideas. Not that it has to be, but only you can make this record. And he went home and he made the record. And that wasn't Let It Rock, though, but something in that whole interaction between the two of us, we kind of had a liking for each other and a desire to work with each other in the future. That's what came out of that.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's a good. One thing I talk a lot about on these podcasts is work-life balance. So, Jimmy, do you have a work-life balance? You seem to be working all the time.
I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, the thing is, there's so much stuff to do that's not really work, but it's work. Like with the computers, and there's stuff, and there's programs, and there's things, and there's so much to learn now. Not just recording, very very little recording people on a microphone. There's like all this other technology that keeps coming out and it keeps turning around. And once again, for me, I just want to understand what's going on. So I'm constantly chasing it, not necessarily chase it to say it's the best thing that ever happened. I just need to see it. I need to see the dog run. That's all.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I would say, based off of that, I'm always doing something that's got something to do with this.
Right.
Well, now it's the NFTs, and now it's,
right. There's so much.
There's so much. There's so much.
It's hard when you're so interested in so many aspects, and it is changing all the time. So how do you not continue to, try to stay abreast of what's happening? So you've been in the music industry for a long time. How do you stay creative?
I guess it's just a thread that runs, and I tune into as much music as I can, to see what the world is doing, to see what I like, to see what I would like to do. If I'm doing a record or whatever, it's like, it's still the same game. You pick references of things that you see and things that you hear, and then you kind of, in your own head, you go, okay, I'd like to have something that kind of goes like this. And you know what I mean? And then you wait for the opportunity to find, like, either the front man or the band or the whatever, where you can use all that stuff that you've actually been filtering around in your head.
Do you like working with brand new bands?
Actually, I do. I do, because there is no mold. The mold is not set yet, and it's wide open as to what can happen. And the other thing is, everybody's not looking. When everybody's looking, it's really tough to make a record or so, because everybody's got an opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, everybody's got a part to play. And what I did learn in Atlantic was, like, everybody should play their part and let everybody play what they can do, and I think you'll come up with a superior product. Right now, the lines are so diluted. The A&R guy's telling you how to write a song, and the publishers telling you how to produce it and all the above, and everybody's just going in circles. And you guys figure out how to figure out the tour when you're going to do that. You guys figure out how to do this and do that when you do this. And you like let the people over here do this. Pick the people that you believe can do that for you, and don't do it by reading the back of other records. Oh, they did it, so we should use them. I mean, I get a big part of that, and I understand how that works. But it's like, do the research. You know, like there's a bunch of acts that didn't break that had some really interesting stuff, and the producers of those acts might be able to take you to that place that's different than all the other stuff that's out there.
Right.
You know.
Right. So having a unique sound isn't a bad thing.
That's true.
So what if there was someone out there now, a student who wants to do what you're doing? What advice do you offer them now before they've started their career, or very early on in their career?
That once again is a very interesting question, because things are changing so much and the lines are changing so much. I believe that, while just as the mixer, I believe that to me the producer should be the mixer, because with your DAW you can sit there and dial that stuff in until you get everything that you want. It wasn't the case back in the day. It really wasn't. That's why you needed a mixer to help you get to the finish line. Now, when you visualize the stuff you created, I think that part of your whole thing is like that you should be able to mix it to a place where it's close to being it. I think that more than ever, I think the songwriting aspect has become a little more, once again, has come to the forefront. You know, I've always looked at music and I always go, there's periods when it's the producer, the artist, and then there's a song. And I think right now we're in the song phase. Because when I listen to all these records, it's like I can't really identify most of the artists, but the songs are what's driving people. You know what I'm saying? The content of the song, and I'm going, okay, so that's where we are. There was a time when Timbaland, Pharrell, and all those guys, it's like they were making the beats that everybody must have, regardless of what you put on top of it. Even though they had some good top liners, but it's like that was the era of the producer. You know, and then there's the era when like there's just the performer, you know, the singers that are singing their asses off and bringing the stuff to you. You know, that's which, by the way, I didn't touch on this, but that's also one of the things that I was blessed to have with Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack, Aretha Franklin, people like that I got to work with. They were interpreters of the highest level, and what you had to do was make sure that you got a clear representation of this piece of history, that moment, because that's really what it was. And you know, you don't have a lot of that now. Now you have a lot of chopping stuff together. People sing one line, two lines, people chop it together, they put effects on it, and they call it a vocal. I'm not putting it down, I'm just saying it's just a different way of going about it, which is why maybe some of the stuff doesn't sound as interesting. Did you know? So the brain, here's how it works. So the brain, once it hears something, it'll know all the variations of what it just heard. So when you fly a vocal, I want to take you to the home, boom, okay, that's it. And when you fly that many times, the first time the brain goes, got it. Hears it again, it goes, I've heard that. And then next time it goes, I've heard that. And next time it goes, I've heard that. And the brain starts relaxing, like, yeah, okay, what the fuck? I ain't hear nothing. And if you sing that same thing 8 different times because it was on tape and you had to sing it, every time there's a slight variation, the brain picks it up and it stays alert.
Oh,
did you know that?
I didn't.
I don't know that either. I made that up,
that.
but it makes sense to me.
It sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. See.
So I started doing these podcasts because I love this community. Pro Audio, the people in it are just the coolest people, and I wanted everybody to know how cool all of you were. So my question for you now, what does community mean to you?
Which community?
You can choose. It could be a family, it could be friends. People have different answers. Some talk about Pro Audio. It just... What's community for you?
I'm not really operating in a community lately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you miss
I
working
do.
doing it?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally do, but it's my circumstances where I am. I'm stuck down here in Florida, which ain't a bad thing. But there's not a lot of community down here. You know, there's a big Latin community around here. I don't really speak Latin,
Right.
and I'm not really a part of that. So I'm really pulling my community from Los Angeles and above,
Yeah.
you know, and so forth and so on. And being a New York kid, it's all kind of I'm just kind of where I am. I just put it that way. And I'm blessed to be in the game, and I'm blessed to be able to be doing this kind of stuff still.
Yeah. Okay, last question. And I ask everybody. So I'm going to come see you in Miami, and we're going to go
Okay.
eat. I never make decisions if I'm not working. So where are we going to go eat? What are we eating? What are we drinking? What kind of music are we listening to? And what are we talking about?
It's
Hey, this is not a typical podcast.
No. That's fine. And I have a place that I take everyone when they come. Everyone, I can say, and so far I've had nothing but rave reviews over many of the years. So you really asked me where we're gonna go, because I've one of three places, but I'm gonna take you to Little Havana. That's Cuban food.
Cool. I like Cuban food.
Great. Supposedly one of the better ones down here. Quick in and out. What are we eating? What are we drinking? Well, you can eat whatever's on the menu if you want.
Okay, what are we drinking?
The mojitos? Are we drinking water? Or are we drinking water or mojitos?
This is not going to work. See, I hate making these decisions. Okay, what kind of music are we listening
well,
to?
if we're going to be in there, I mean, we can listen to music at the studio first, so we can listen to all kinds of crap. Good crap.
Okay.
Good crap. We can listen to Atmos
Good crap
stuff.
is good.
That's interesting. How much Atmos have you heard?
I haven't listened to any Atmos stuff.
You haven't? Oh, well, some is good and some isn't anything. But yeah, I have got some good sounding stuff. So that's the music we can do. What was the other question? And what do we talk about?
Okay. What are we going to talk about?
I always leave that open. As Bruno Mars says, I leave the door open for that one because it really depends on the moment. Any one thing that you say could take me over here, and any one thing I say could take you over here. So, I mean, I don't for 1 second think that we're going to have a lack of conversation. There's too much.
No, I don't either. Yeah. Okay, so this has been great. I hope that you come out for my golf tournament October 31st.
Where is it?
We're doing a tribute for Al and Ed. It's going to be in LA, Santa Clarita.
I'll come.
So everybody
That
will be
should be
there.
amazing,
So I hope you
actually.
come out.
That should be great.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Everyone.
And then you'll be part of the community.
Yeah, no, that's I like that. Calendar it is.
So, okay, I'll send you info. So thank you so much. This was great. I love talking to you. I always enjoy it.
Thank you, Karen.